icy wind burns and scars, rushes in like a fallen star through the narrow space between these bars, looking down on Prison Grove.
All right, so this is The Nose. Remember The Nose? We used to do The Nose. We still do The Nose. We don't do it often enough. And so today we are gathering together 3 panelists to talk about 2 works of culture and make some endorsements as well. We're doing this on Thursday for air on Friday, and that turned out to be a stupid idea because there's a snowstorm today and nobody could come in. I'm here, and the maestro, Dylan Reyes, is here. But other than that, very lonely and quiet here. We're going to talk today about Sing Sing, a movie that has got a lot of critical fondness and, as they say, buzz. Over it's actually existed for quite a long time now, and before that it was 8.5 years in the making. Kind of the same amount of time it took to get The Brutalist done too. So apparently that's the magic number this year. We'll also talk about a series called American Primeval, which is created by Peter Berg, the person behind Friday Night Lights. We'll say more about that too, but let me tell you something about who's here, or who's here on Zoom anyway. Rebecca Castellani, co-founder of Quiet Corner Communications and a freelance writer. Tanisha Dugan is associate producer at Octopus Theatricals. Bill Huesman is professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University and the author of Primetime Prisons, a book about the representation of incarceration on television. Sing Sing is a sort of a drama about both theater and prison. It's directed by a guy named Greg Cuidar, written by Clint Bentley Cuidar, and the screenplay, actually, on the screenplay credit are 2 formerly incarcerated people who are, in fact, the 2 protagonists of this movie, Clarence Devine I. Macklin and John Devine G. Whitfield. So it's distributed by A24. It was a big hit at the Toronto Film Festival and kind of has had a little bit of an awkward process through the pipeline of film release. The one thing I want to say before we begin the conversation, I was just saying to the panel before we get going, is, I mean, this is, it's grossed $3.9 million worldwide so far, which is not a huge amount of money. But what's interesting about this is, first of all, I don't think it's all done grossing, and particularly if it does a little bit of stuff with the awards. And what they've done is they implemented the filmmakers implemented an idea. They tried it on a smaller film called Jockey a few years ago. This is a slightly bigger film. It's a cast of 25 or so, crew of 50 or so. Everybody who worked on the movie is getting paid the same scale, whether the lead actor, director, minor cast member, whatever. All of them, as long as they spend a minimum number of days on the set, also have creative equity in the movie. And this is pretty radical, when the first money comes out, it won't all go to the investors. 40% of it will go to all the people that I was just talking about, the creatives, the actors, the crews, the makeup people, you name it. So before we get to the panelists on this, we'll play a little clip from the movie. You're going to hear Coleman Domingo as John Devine G. Whitfield, Clarence Macklin as himself, Clarence Devine I. Macklin, and Sean San Jose as a prisoner called Mike. Here's A1. Go ahead.
So why did you sign up for the program?
Yeah, you got some pretty volunteers I saw up on that stage. Chicks y'all got up here.
Yeah, man, it's not really like that.
They're our colleagues.
All right. Well, one day I came across a book, man, on keep locking in my cell. So I had else to do. So I got this book, cracked it open, and some of the things the brother was saying in the book really resonated with me, man. I mean, what the brother said, he said, when we are born, we cry because we're born to a stage of fools. And I said, yo, whoever wrote this, man, had to did a bed before, Yeah.
So King Lear just fell off of a library cart and you just happened to pick it up and read a few pages.
Yeah, funny, right?
We'll be in touch.
All right. Stay up.
Okay, he knows verse.
Yeah.
All right. We should also say, with the Oscars coming up on March 2nd, that Coleman Domingo is up, I believe, for Best Actor. The film is up for Best Screenplay and Best Original Song, which you're going to hear from the panel. There could have been more. I think in terms of nominations. But Rebecca Castellani, get us started. Give us your thumbnail or your overall vibe with this movie.
Yeah, I went into this pretty blind. I watched the trailer when asked to watch this movie for the nose and was a little wary. I thought it was potentially going to be kind of cheesy. And I think all of us on the panel have a healthy skepticism, especially Bill, being a scholar in this field that he is, around the media's portrayal of prison. And I was very pleasantly surprised. Really engaging film. It captivated my attention from minute one to the end credits. Really fabulous performances, and just sort of, it felt understated in a way that was very approachable and very earnest and resonant, in a way that I really haven't ever seen a movie about prison sort of take that tack. And I thought it was really effective and beautifully done.
We should also say that on the cast, people who are playing themselves or are former participants, alumni, they're sometimes called, in rehabilitation through the arts, this program for incarcerated people, they far outnumber the professional actors. And there's only a few professional. I think there's 3 that I can think of involved in the movie, but and of course they're all professional actors now. Bill Usman, let's hear about your skepticism, healthy or unhealthy or whatever. But just also overall, how did you react to the movie?
Well, I appreciate you plugging my book, Colin. The $7 of royalties that I've received so far is going to go up by at
I
least...
have creative equity in your book, actually. I get paid, I think, 40% of the original profits.
So the extra 50 cents I'll raise, 40%, I can't do the math. So I love this film, and primarily I love it because it is the antithesis of everything that I wrote about when I looked at how television in particular was the focus of my book, but, including, televised movies and stuff, have historically depicted incarceration and incarcerated people with all of the tropes focused on violence, riots, escapes, brutality, and certainly, prisons are inhumane and brutal spaces, but that doesn't mean that every person who is incarcerated is a brutal, inhumane person. And unfortunately, the tendency in these type of representations are to depict incarcerated people as these scary others. And this film goes in the opposite direction of this. This is a deeply, deeply humane film which treats these people as real human beings with their own desires and their passions, who are able to get turned on by the arts and who are just really reaching for something. And that from the very opening moment, because, what other prison film starts with, someone, doing a soliloquy from A Midsummer's Night Dream.
Yeah. So, and I just wanted, as we're just kind of going around the table here. So, Tanisha, I know that you had a somewhat different reaction to this than what the first 2 nose panelists are saying, but I'm very interested to hear more.
I did. And I swear one of these shows I will come on with all of the love and support and raging enthusiasm for something that we watch. But I think
you liked Yellowstone. I still haven't forgotten. I still haven't gotten over that.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And I still watched the damn thing. Yeah. Anyway, I think, to your point, Bill, I have formerly incarcerated people in my life. And so the sort of framework of look at these human beings is not enough for me. I think you're right. I know you're right that what has been offered thus far in the culture doesn't include that. But for me, that isn't enough of a bar to make this work. I watched it, and I think Coleman's performance is lovely, and I agree that Divine Eye's performance is amazing. I love to see these actors get a chance to come into the industry. I don't think this industry will hold them beyond this project. And so for that reason, it feels a little bit like a charity effort. But again, let me leave room for the fact, let me hold space for the fact that this project is trying to be socially justice minded. And so perhaps there is some infrastructure in place to support these actors in continuing to work in the industry. But that for me, it was all the feel good and all the sentimentality. But someone I know who was formerly incarcerated watched it with me, and they had this very keen observation when the correction officer walks past all the guys, and he's like, it's just not rough enough. That the dichotomy between, and this is someone who actually was also engaged in theater arts while they were incarcerated, like the dichotomy between the humanity of theatrical arts as a practice and the day-to-day living of the experience. To me, that's actually the really exciting tension. And then how are they able to hold that humanity when they leave, which this project gives you the potential of, but never fulfills.
We should say, though, that I think recidivism for people who go through RTA is at 3%, which I think is considerably lower than the Gen Pop, as they say. Tanisha, I just want to stay with this for a second, because I think it's a really interesting perspective. And certainly, Bill and Rebecca and I are nice white liberals who probably, who might be a little bit...
I know, I'm sorry, guys. I shut that conversation down when I dropped that.
No.
So we don't mind. But I just want to say... I want to say this to you, Tanisha, have you react, but then I want to hear the two white liberals talk about it too, which is how I'm going to refer to them for the rest of the show too. But no, is like one thing I would say about this, I just wonder whether that critique is a little Procrustean in the sense that, like, how finely tuned do the sensibilities of a movie have to be, a movie like this, to be satisfactory? I mean, I think one of the things that I think both Bill and Rebecca have kind of hinted at is this is not a movie that takes any big Hollywood swings. There isn't any glorious finale where you see this wonderful production and everything's happy. In fact, one of the protagonists, I mean, everybody in this movie, they're really interested in their theater, but they're way more interested in getting out of prison. There's something they care about a lot more than that. But I don't think it Hollywoodizes it. I think it in fact shies away from having any big cloying moments or, capering like a coach dog for our approval. I don't know. I mean, is it, I guess, Tanisha, I'm wondering how realistic it is. Maybe realistic is the wrong word, but to ask it to do even more, to back even more away. I mean, I can tell you that movies about newspapers and radio stations are also not very good representations of what life is like. I don't know. React to some of the gibberish I just said.
No, I mean, I think what you're asking, and I think what I'm responding to, is that because there is a dearth of content, right, for you to put in a context around it, it feels to me like our wanting to sort of run to this as something fantastic is because there is an absence, a vacuum of it. And so there is not a rigor around it because there isn't anything else to compare it to. You're right. Yes. In the same way that when I look at, plays within plays on a film screen, I'm not, judging it because it feels exactly like what it's like to produce a play or produce an album or whatever. But I do think that we as culture consumers have a library of things that we've seen that we then compare what we see to. And because there's just not a lot of it, I think our critique of this is, a lot of perfectly fine Black art gets pushed through because, especially in awards season, there is an understanding that there has to be representation of folks, right? I'm not quite sure Amelia Perez is up to snuff in terms of like being at the pinnacle of what we can create. But we've always been in a moment. I don't think this is specific to the past, the post-Obama era. We've always been in this like, where are the women? Where are the Hispanics? Where are the stories that tug on your hearts? Where you're, so that's my blubbering response to your question, which is, I don't think there's enough stuff to compare it to, so we love it because we're like, finally.
I think that's really fair. I think what you just said is really fair. That because there's not enough stuff to compare it to, we tend to latch onto it kind of frantically. I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. So let's go back to the white liberals. No, I'm just kidding. But
the audience will never have me back. They're like, this one.
No. We love you for that reason. You liked Yellowstone and you had a hard time with Sing Sing. What can I say? You're like my ideal nose panelist. So we just talk a little bit about the acting. I should say in my house, Colman Domingo is kind of like a minor divinity because my partner first saw him around 2010, I think downtown at the Vineyard in Scottsboro Boys and a one-man autobiographical show he was doing, and then started talking to everybody about Colman Domingo, and nobody knew who that was. But now, we should say that this movie was made in 19 days, and the reason it was made in 19 days was they wanted Colman Domingo in this role, and he had 19 days in between Rustin and the redo of The Color Purple. And so he said, you can have those days. And that was their shooting schedule. But Rebecca, we should talk a little bit about these performances. I mean, Domingo really is kind of amazing. I feel as though, I don't know if it's fair to say that Clarence Macklin steals this movie, but he's the guy I can't take my eyes off in this movie for a whole bunch of different reasons. But I'd love to hear your thinking maybe about both of those performances and any other one you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, it's a great point. I definitely had the sensation watching it that there was little like life imitating art happening in real time with Clarence upstaging Colman Domingo's performance in many moments. And, you don't kind of anticipate that going in. He's the big name attached to the project. There really was no other actor's name I recognized. And let me just sort of, so the listeners can kind of get it. What happens within the film is that Colman Domingo's character, Divine G, has been sort of the resident star of this Sing Sing theater company. And what happens is this other guy, Divine I, shows up and with no experience whatsoever announces, among other things, that he wants to play Hamlet, which is, you were stepping right on this guy's toes. But anyway, continue with what you were saying. That's really important context. I was just going to plow right through that. So I think that it really was interesting to see these two actors sort of play off each other and going into this knowing that Colman Domingo is kind of the big name attached to this, and then feeling like I was really more so drawn to every other performance. And, not to say Colman Domingo wasn't spectacular. He was. But I found that the other performances felt less like acting. And obviously once I learned, and I didn't realize quite until the end that so many of the actors were alumni of the program, that made a lot of sense to me. But it just felt like Colman Domingo was acting in the way he does, which is fabulous and filled with gravitas and emotion. But my eye kept just traveling to all the other performances. I believe the actor that played Mike is a professional actor and the drama teacher, but everybody else was not. And I did really enjoy the actor who played Mike's performance.
He's Colman Domingo's best friend. I think they came up and through the San Francisco theater scene. We should say Colman Domingo didn't get famous till he was 40. And just started to get famous, and he's 55 now. But so, Bill, I just want to build on something that that Rebecca just said, because that whole idea of acting, because there's, to me, one of the wow moments in this movie is that Domingo's character, Divine G, goes before a parole board, and the woman who seems to be head of the parole board is asking some questions about the theater program, and she says, "Are you acting right now, or have you been acting at any point during this hearing?" And he kind of sputters and stumbles a little bit. And one of the things he tries out, but I don't think he completes the thought. He starts to say, I think he says, that's not even, and what he wants to say, I think, is that's not even how acting works. Acting isn't about disguising the truth. It's about seeking the truth. But he doesn't say that. He just, which I really respect the writers of this movie for letting us complete that thought. But it really is an interesting question, too. And Rebecca talked about how the film kind of mirrors the life that it's about. And to me, that's another interesting question is, what is acting in this environment?
Yeah. And, I'm acting as a nice white liberal because I'm actually not very nice. Right. And I'm way too far to the left to just be a liberal. But some of my best friends are nice white liberals. But it is, I did make a note when I was watching this that parole hearings are so much like an audition. And, you're auditioning for your life, basically. Are you going to be allowed to resume your life in front of a group of usually pretty predisposed, harsh critics? And they do some great things in the film where they show, in close-ups, the various members auditioning for their parts and rehearsing them. I love those little sequences. And then they go to this parole hearing and they open up that question, and it is a question without an easy answer, which is why it's so perfect that he doesn't come up with a pat answer. And I also thought about the social scientist Irving Goffman's ideas that all of our life in public is a type of performance, building on, the Shakespeare quote about all the world's a stage and all of us just merely being players. And so, when we are in public, when are we not acting? But particularly in those circumstances, when you're incarcerated, of course you have to put on a performance, and in their case, a performance of masculinity as a type of protective shell. And then when you go in front of these harsh critics, what exactly performance are they looking for, and what's going to win their applause? These are great questions, and they're the type of questions that I think the film really tries to open up, but not in stereotypical ways, and that's part of, yes, okay, there are some stereotypical notions in the film, but it doesn't, it complicates those. It goes beyond those.
Tanisha, take this wherever you want to go with it.
I actually want to underscore something you said about the writing, which and this particular scene, which is that there is a bias towards these kinds of programs that are trying to make those inside more humane. And so there was a little bit of I actually wish there was more moment or writing in which the bias of are you acting now is one, trying to hold Coleman's character in the space, but it's also a real kind of indictment from her of what she thinks this program is. And I just, I guess was curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the structural sort of tensions with a program like that, but also like outside of the troupe, the tensions around, because you bring up a great point, Bill, about sort of the masculinity as a shield, right? And so what does it mean for these men who choose to be a part of this program when they step out of the program, right, and go back into the population? What are those relationships like, and how does it affect or not the general, like, what are the reverberations within the general population, but also what are the disconnects for them as they're trying to find more empathy, find more truth, find more compassion, and then stepping out into, into the yard and being like, is there a space for this? Right. That's just a question for me as we think about the writing of this and its spareness, because it is spare, but also like wanting them to sort of give us more worlds, or give me more worlds, as it relates to these guys.
All right. So I want to do one more thing here, but we have to do it fairly quickly because there's some Mormon militiamen who want to come in and use the studio. But the Oscar nominations have been announced. There are 10 films nominated for Best Picture. Rebecca, this is not one of those 10 films, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I was bummed this didn't get a Best Picture nom. I liked Wicked as much as everybody else, but I think when we compare the two, this had more to offer in terms of performances, cinematography, which is something we haven't touched on, but I loved the way this was filmed. It sort of almost had a documentary quality.
Well, it's shot in what's called Super 16 too, and one of the things that does, as I understand it, I'm not really conversant with all this stuff, but it really lends itself to close-ups. And this is there are a lot of faces in this movie that you see very close up for long periods of time. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, so I think that all of those elements together, it had a very strong package as far as I'm concerned. I do think some of this conversation I want to sit with more and think about and sort of reevaluate my initial sort of knee jerk to this, but I do think it compared to some of the other films I've seen that have received Oscar noms, I think it is absolutely better than some of them. I haven't seen Emilia Perez yet, but the clips I've seen did not fill me with confidence that deserves to probably be our Best Picture winner. So yeah, I was kind of surprised by that.
I mean, Bill,
curious.
Bill, I could make the case for knocking out. There's another movie about some men who are being held behind high walls and forced to wear uniforms. That's Conclave. But and
I agree.
I would bump Conclave out for this pretty easily.
100%.
But Bill, love you. Thank you, Tanisha. But Bill, your thoughts?
I haven't seen Conclave yet, although I want to, so I can't specifically weigh in on that. But since we're talking about these nominations, I agree. I think it probably should have been able to squeeze into that 10 that they're doing of potential Best Pictures. But I do want to point out that the closing song, which is beautiful, has been nominated for Best Original Song in a film. And I wanted to shout out just the score in general, which is by a musician who's part of the group The National. And I found that it's subtle, but I found it to be really, really powerful and effective in underscoring all the emotions. So maybe it'll get something for music.
All right. We're going to play that song right at the end of this segment. But before that, last word for you, Tanisha. Anything you want to add to what's been said so far?
No, I co-sign you on Conclave.
All right. All right. So we're going to take a little break here. You're going to hear that Oscar-nominated song, and then we're going to come back, and things are going to get... There's no violence, by the way, in Sing Song, but we're going to double
really
up
important.
on violence when we talk about American Primeval.
Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh,
Okay, we're going to drift back in time to roughly the 1850s. American Primeval is a limited run series on Netflix. I feel very confident in saying there'll be no season 2. I could be wrong. I mean, it could be done. It is a creation of Peter Berg, the person best known for Friday Night Lights. And it has as its male lead Taylor Kitsch, who played Tim Riggins in Friday Night Lights. The female lead is Betty Gilpin. There are some other very interesting performances in this. It takes place against the backdrop of the so-called Utah War, in which a kind of three-way series of battles took place between the U.S. Army and so-called Mormon militia and members of the Native American tribes in this area, Shoshone, Ute, and Paiute. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over. I should also say that I'm the reason, it's my fault that everybody had to watch this, because if there's fault to be distributed, because my son and I started watching it and we kind of fell in love with it, although it's incredibly violent. But so let's reverse the order of the panel from the previous segment. And Tanisha Dugan, why don't you get us started here? Let us know what you thought about American Primeval.
So I suspect I am like you and your child, where I dug this, but I think I have a different relationship to the mythology that is being presented here, and I have a different expectation of humanity as it relates to this story and its characters. But I also was thinking, I am deeply in the midst of a work that is looking at Virgil and his creation of the Aeneid, and I'm curious if this sort of journey of the two Virgils is part of like this sort of subconscious reason why I'm digging into this, as they're both sort of like embarking on what it means to be in a society and how to sort of like move inside of it. So I give myself some grace that perhaps my affection, it's a strong word, my interest in American Primeval is because I'm not as closely connected to the human beings that populate it.
It's a really interesting thing, and I think Bill's going to chime in with some Iliad stuff here. I just want to say that one of my favorite shows from last year, I spent an hour with the crime writer Don Winslow, who kind of ended his career of crime fiction with a trilogy of kind of contemporary crime novels that were loosely based on the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. And so I think there's a lot of that going around now, because Christopher Nolan's doing an Odyssey, I think, right now. But we've got a clip to play, but let's hear from the other two panelists too. So Bill, I know you did actually, since she said Aeneid, you should say Iliad.
I'm so glad that Tanisha introduced the Aeneid, because I was a little worried about whether I'm kind of stretching here a little too far to see some of the Iliad in this. Not a lot of nice white liberals in American Primeval. There's a couple, that are meant to pull at our heartstrings. But when I say the Iliad, I'm thinking about the male pride and rage, the quest for captured women, the lust for revenge, the horrible injuries and death, the deceptions, the wanton destruction, where all sides end up suffering because they're consumed by their wrath. So now I feel a little fortified that maybe that's not too much of a stretch. And the other thing I would say just quickly is that, speaking of the Iliad and how much it is about male power and wrath, in some ways we really see kind of diametrically opposed versions of masculinity in American Primeval and Sing Sing. There are a few male characters who show some semblance of nobility and honor, particularly Riggins. Mr. Reed. But there are the exceptions, where the overall tendencies of the men in the show are vile, violent, lusting for dominance and power, but, based in some historical and factual realities. And it's not like we've entirely moved past that.
We should say also, just to set up what Rebecca is going to say next, is because I haven't really sketched out the plot very well. Most of it does revolve around the character played by Betty Gilpin. Her name is, at least nominally, Sarah Rowell. She's on the run from the law. She's a fugitive, and she's on the run through some very, very treacherous country. And she is taken under the wing at a certain point of the Taylor Kitsch character, Isaac Reed. But this, once again, all is against the backdrop of some very militarily aggressive moves by Brigham Young and his Mormon community, and some pretty poignant drama going on in the Native American community. And I still haven't really explained the plot very well. But Rebecca, just tell me where you want to go with this.
Well, unfortunately, my reaction was not super favorable to poor American Primeval. I think part of the problem was I binge watched this in 48 hours after watching Sing Sing and having this like very intense emotional reaction to that, transitioning into American Primeval and the just never-ending, relentless degree of violence. I was so apathetic towards it. The most horrific stuff would be happening on screen, and I'd just be like, yeah, that tracks. I knew that was coming. Like, it was just complete apathy for me on this. And I feel badly for American Primeval because I think this is really stemming from my Taylor Sheridan fatigue, which is the fault of this show. I don't think I would have ever ventured into the Sheridan verse if it weren't for you guys making me watch all of these shows. And I feel like this is his favored domain, and I've seen these characters before. I've seen them get shot, stabbed, and scalped 6 ways to Sunday, and it's just not hitting on the emotional notes that it wants me to feel. Like, I could really see the intentional, like, all right, I want you to be sad here. This is a tragic moment between this husband and wife, and I just sort of was rolling my eyes and kind of zoned out. But I didn't like unilaterally hate it. There were definitely things I really enjoyed. I thought Betty Gilpin was fantastic. She's got one of the most expressive faces in the game, I think. I really enjoyed the centering of the female characters. I feel like a lot of this sort of American frontier stuff almost always focuses on the brutality of men. And there was some pretty brutal women doing some brutal things, but also that sort of pathos that a woman's story in this environment brings to the table, which I enjoyed.
I want to just, can I just, yes,
Yeah, of course.
can I yes and that and say that?
Yes, and
first
me.
of all, Sarah Lightfoot-Leone, who plays kind of the second female lead as Abish Pratt?
Abish,
yeah. She's, by the way, having a moment right now. She also has a terrific role in The Agency. And so I think she's really remarkable. But I especially want to shout out Irene Bedard, who plays Winterbird. And Irene Bedard, for complicated reasons, used to be standing in the driveway next to my house. I don't know, sometime back in the 90s, smoking cigarettes. And she was, at that point, she'd been cast as the voice of Pocahontas in the Disney Pocahontas. And they used a little bit of her look in the look of Pocahontas as well. And weirdly, she played Pocahontas' mother in the Terrence Malick The New World movie. So, but I haven't seen her for a while, and I think she's really, really great in this. She's got kind of an important message she has to convey, or a series of messages, and I think she does a really great job. So, yeah. Oh, so he wants me to play the clip, so let's play the clip. So you're going to hear Shea Whigham as Jim Bridger. Jim Bridger runs this kind of fort that is sort of a trading post and a fort. Betty Gilpin is Sarah Rowell. Taylor Kitsch, as we said, is Isaac, and Preston Mota is Devin Rowell. I think this is from the first episode. B1, Maestro.
This here is Miss Sarah Rowell. She's looking for a lead to Crook Springs. This fellow I was telling you about, Isaac Reed.
Mr. Reed?
I ain't got no business in Crooks.
Yes, well, we would be your business. $500 to assist us in reaching my husband there.
Jim Beckworth figured the trip was worth it.
Between her and Jim Beckworth.
True. And I only feel obligated to help her fill his role on account of that crazy son-bitch Frenchman Henri drunk shot her companion.
And they shoot Jim Beckworth, too.
No, Beckworth left without due to her being 3 weeks late.
Shouldn't have been late.
I explained that to her.
I am aware that our delayed arrival has helped create this situation. Now, all that matters is whether you are willing to take on the position of our guide or not.
I ain't got business in Crooks. Especially with a woman and a cripple.
$750. $100 in advance and the balance when we reach my husband.
Got no
in Crooks.
business in Crooks, Mother. And I'm not crippled, mister.
Will you be our guide or not?
No.
So I should say Devin Rowell plays Sarah Rowell's little boy. So I don't know, Tanisha, I'm not sure what question I want to ask you. So just say whatever it is that you want to say about this, or wherever we're at in this conversation.
No, I actually, Rebecca, some of what you were talking about made me think of with projects like this or projects like in the Sheridan verse, like what is it meant to do? And I probably am always overstating the sort of architecture of culture, but I do think this is an allegory. And Bill, you brought this up in our conversations today of you see a lot of what's happening now in this work. And I'm always curious about the intentionality. I mean, Betty Gilpin's character is, I hesitate to use the term Karen, but she has so much of that in the way that she will, sacrifice others all the time for her own gain. And in some ways it's refreshing that she's a little bit brazen about it, but also you'll have scenes in which she's mouthing to Taylor Kitsch, "I'm sorry," as if that the intention wasn't to activate harm. So I guess my curiosity and interest in American Primeval is the allegory, and I take your point loud and clear, Rebecca, that I'm not sure if an audience can get that. And then my next question is, well, then how? Because, Brigham Young got what he wanted. He got a state, even if it's not his own country. And I do think that in the same ways that I said this to you guys earlier, that, you know, our cousins in the South are still fighting. I do think that there's a little bit of that kind of militaristic and politico in, you know, we call them Christian nationalists, but they're as much members of the LDS as they are, you know, Episcopalian. And so this fight, this constant yearning for the violence and the intrigue, and the wasting of differing groups, you know, is I think why I keep wanting to, you know, I am curious. I don't know what a season 2 is, but if it is still beating at this allegory, it feels worthwhile to me. But perhaps, as you said, Rebecca, the audience isn't there to take it as such.
Right. I just want to say, first of all, that Episcopalian Christian nationalists, all they want is for cocktail hour to be federally mandated. You know, that is their only thing that they're going after. And I don't like to hear them lumped in with other Christian nationalists. But so, Bill, you were
going to cry.
I know it doesn't sound bad, does it? Bill, you and I were on a Nose episode where we were bullied into doing this by a person named Scott Sherman. We talked about a movie called Small Engine Repair, and the thing that was funny about Small Engine Repair was that it had in it as the two protagonists, Shea Wiggum, who you just heard is Jim Bridger, and John Bernthal. And the big joke was, I mean, both of those guys just play bent characters 90% of the time. they're bad news, and they're sneaky and devious and knife in the back kind of characters. And so it was so refreshing to see Shea Wiggum play Jim Bridger, who, by the way, is a historical figure, really did exist. And, you know, was one of the closer things to a likable character in this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the phrase right there. Closer to a likable character. Although, Taylor Kitsch, he, it's basically the same performance as Riggins from Friday Night Lights.
He's a Christ figure. I have a long thing. We don't have time for it, but he's always a Christ figure. He kind of suffers.
You can't help but be attracted to that eventually, right? And that's why,
Well, you're Jewish. I don't know how attracted you are to Christ figures, but,
Hey, excuse me, have you forgotten the origins?
He was one of your guys, yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, until he did the thing.
We have to talk about this later. But yeah, no, I already mentioned, like, most of the men are like so vile, and I don't want to push the allegory thing too hard, but there's a line.
There you go. You're having the response I had about Sing Sing.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
All right. You know what?
I am gonna.
I need to sort of. I'm sorry. We are so out of time, and I want you guys to have some time to endorse some stuff on the other side. No, you didn't do anything wrong, but we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with this wonderful panel.
Push the allegory. That's what we'll leave.
And we're back thanks to our technical producer, the maestro, Dylan Reyes. This episode was produced, like most Nose episodes, by Jonathan McPants. With our terrific panel, Rebecca Castellani, Bill Usman, Tanisha Dugan. We're going to make some recommendations for you here. Rebecca, why don't you get us started?
All right. So I have a Betty Gilpin adjacent endorsement for you today, and that is the play Oh Mary, written by Cole Escola. I was lucky enough to see it right before Cole left, and he was absolutely sensational. It is a play based very, very loosely on the life of Mary Todd Lincoln.
I'll say.
Very loosely, her husband and her theater teacher. It's so loosely based that Cole was recently interviewed, and they're like, how much research did you do into the life of Mary Todd Lincoln? And his response was, I actively tried to unlearn things I knew about Mary Todd Lincoln before writing this play. It's very silly, very gay, very fun. And Betty Gilpin has just taken over the role of Old Mary. I think I haven't seen her in the role, although a friend did see it and said she was fabulous. I'm not surprised because her physical comedy skills in this role are a match made in heaven. I believe Betty Gilpin will be in the role until mid-March, and then they just announced today that Titus Burgess is taking over.
Oh, that'll be I'd go see that.
So fun.
I saw Cole Esco. I'm not a big fan of this play, but I know I'm in the minority here. So, but yes, good recommendations. Bill Usman, what have you got for us?
So speaking of psychotic, violent men, I've been binging Bates Motel, which is a television series that was on from 2013 to 2017. As you might guess from the title, it's framed as a prequel to Psycho, but it's set in the current era rather than the earlier time period of the film, which oddly kind of works. Vera Farmiga and Freddie Highmore are really terrific as the psychotically codependent Norma and Norma Bates. And you get to see how it all develops and how he gradually gets transformed into a monster. There's lots of great allusions to Psycho and to Hitchcock in general. It's very Freudian. It's impossible to ignore the Oedipal struggle that's at play here. It can get a little bit soapy at times or a little bit repetitive with the constant, murders and conflicts and so forth. But I think overall, it's really worth the watch.
What I feel is missing in the original Psycho is just not enough stuff about hotel management. So I hope that's in there.
There's a little bit more of that. Yes.
See, I want to do the comedy series where it's mainly about running the motel. So Tanisha Dugan, you will probably be making the last recommendation of the day. So tell us what it is.
Well, I was going to first endorse Mark Aldridge, who was the librarian at the facility that my dear friend was at, who helped to build the theater program there. So just a shout out to Mark Aldridge. And then Bill, because you made this Bates Motel note, I want to say it's called Last Hotel Kitchen, but it's basically a cooking show that Titus Burgess is the host of. Ooh. And they're like in a spooky hotel. I believe it's on Netflix. So check that out.
Ooh, that does sound worth looking at. Okay, it looks like I might have a little bit of time here. I just want to say that if you haven't seen the original Friday Night Lights, at some point you should. Now, it just went off of Netflix. It just went off of Netflix, and I'm guessing it's going to come back to Peacock because there's a reboot of the series coming with an entirely new cast. Although Taylor Kitsch said that he would, if he had
play coach.
No, if he could be for 2 minutes, he could be an opposing coach or something like that. He'd like that. But everybody from the original agrees that they need to do a new one. But it's really remarkable. It's kind of the second place we saw Michael B. Jordan. We could go on and on. I mean,
so good.
Yeah, so many people Jesse Plemons, who's ubiquitous now. We met him through there. I would also just say can't lose. And I would also quickly say, apropos of Rebecca's recommendation, Glow, the Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. Betty Gilpin's amazing. Alison Brie, to me, and Mark Maron are both amazing in that too. But Betty Gilpin is great in that too, and that's still on Netflix. And it's even if you don't think that sounds like a good thing, watch 5 episodes and see if you still feel that way. All right, thanks to this wonderful panel to Tanisha Dugan and Rebecca Castellani and Bill Usman. We're ending the show just as I'm beginning to forget how to talk, so that's good. And thanks for listening.
Danbury, Waterbury, Oliveberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah. Along the rail.